Hello everyone, my name is Gabriela and welcome back to another dev diary for Ara History Untold. We know it's been a hot minute and the Oxide team has been hard at work fine-tuning Ara, so we have a load of new features we can't wait to talk about. If this is your first time here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell to stay updated as we'll be releasing content more frequently over the next few months. In today's episode, we'll take a look at Ara's narrative event system and the complex choices players will have to make as leaders of a new nation. Our guest today is Gabriela Leskur, narrative and experience lead at Oxide Games. Gabriela, welcome to the show. How's everything going over at Oxide?
Thank you, Zach. Things are going very well here. We're really excited and looking forward to releasing later this year. So it's just getting those finishing touches on all our systems and getting ready to share the game with all of you.
Oh, that's great to hear. With that covered, let's dive straight into Ara's narrative events. So what can you tell me about this system and how these events fit into the overall gameplay?
The narrative event system is meant to add to the immersion of being a leader of a nation across time. So obviously you're making your major choices throughout the gameplay, but these are meant to add a little bit of flavor and realism to what are some of the big questions that leaders have to ask, as well as some of the mundane day-to-day questions that a leader would face in their interactions with tribes, in their interactions with other nations, and in their interactions with the world. So this system really is trying to add a little bit of that immersion to the gameplay, this idea that you are role-playing as this leader across all of our acts and across all of history.
All right, that sounds good. I do like immersion. Will players have the opportunity to trigger narrative events through their own actions, or are they solely reactive to the game's progression?
Events will be both triggered by player action and by their interactions with the world, with tribes, with other nations. So it's a yes and, it's a both. We hope that players will feel that the world is responding to them, and there are events that are responsive to unique player actions and things that are happening in the game itself, as well as if you meet another nation or another tribe, they will likely come to you with their own stories, with their own requests, as it would be in the real world.
Will a player's decisions impact their nation's standing with other settlements or nations in the game?
Yes. Both the tribe events and the diplomatic events give players the opportunity to consider, how might my actions impact not only the world at large and my nation, but how this other tribe or this other nation views me and my people? There can be impacts on culture. There can be impacts on education within your nation. There can be impacts on diplomatic standing with another tribe and with another nation based on the choices that players make in these events.
Right. So your choices do have consequences.
Yes, totally. And we tried our best to replicate some of the things that we see in the real world with any choice. Not all of them are just good or just bad, but having a balance of there are things that can be beneficial from a choice, and there can be consequences that provide obstacles and challenges for players. But that doesn't mean that a choice is good inherently or the wrong choice inherently.
Can players expect recurring narrative arcs or storylines that evolve over multiple events?
Yes, that is part of the narrative event system. It's quite a robust system with different subcategories of events. As I've mentioned, we have ones that have to do with tribes, that have to do with other nations, and then we also have general events which are responsive to things that are happening in the game world at large, as well as player choice. And some of these events can lead to follow-on events based on what the player made as a choice in that first initial experience or narrative storyline.
Tying the narrative events to the acts in the game, will the type of events change as players progress to Act 2 and 3?
Yes, so there will be different types of events as well as different types of potential rewards or consequences that come throughout the game. We try our best to play with this idea of alternate history while also honoring some of the historical progression that exists in the real world. For example, in Act 1, we see a lot of our tribes being the people that we encounter encounter and interact with. Whereas in Act 2 and Act 3, we're focusing more on some of the diplomatic nations and those types of narrative questions. We also have events that are responsive to technologies that you might only receive or have access to in Act 2 and Act 3. So we're not talking about like nuclear fusion in antiquities, for example. So the events provide benefits and consequences that are relevant for where you are in your nation's history.
So we know a lot of elements in ARA are going to be competitive. Will players need to compete for event rewards, or is each nation given its own events to complete?
For the most part, each nation or each player will be given their own events, and they won't be competing too much with other nations as much as they're looking at the different event outcomes, the different choices presented to them, and seeing what's the best for their strategy or playstyle. In some cases, different choices for an event will be locked behind prerequisites, like if you have an item or if you have a certain relationship level. So in that way, you're kind of competing with yourself. And there's replayability, being like, oh, if only I had 3 swords, I would have been able to choose that choice. But there is a level of competitiveness that exists with our act goals. Act goals are a element of our game design where multiple players are working to a certain achievement that can only be given 1 first place, 1 second place, etc. In that circumstance, we have narrative events that introduce and give flavor to these act goals, and there is a level of competition there.
Going a bit more specific with these narrative events, are there any rare or special narrative events that players can uncover through specific in-game actions or conditions?
Yes. Our general events are based on a robust trigger and condition system that is responsive to game state and to player action. I won't tell you all the Easter eggs there, but that has to do with, did you decide to build a certain improvement? Well, there's a chance that because you did that, you'll get this special event. Did you go to war with a certain nation and have a certain outcome? Well, it's possible that a certain event could take place because of the choices you made as a player. So there are infinite possibilities. Every time you play, if the choices you make differ, then it's likely that you're going to run into different events. It also depends upon which other nations you're playing against, particularly with AI nations. Different leaders from different nations that you're playing against have their own diplomatic events that you can only achieve if you happen to be playing and you run into Joan of Arc. There are certain things that can only happen if you are playing as Joan of Arc. So there's this interesting element, not only of being responsive to player action and player choice in the game world, but player choice at the beginning, who you chose as your leader or who you might have chose as the AI nations and their leaders.
All right, that sounds like there's a lot to experience in the game, but I have to ask you the ultimate question. What are you most excited for players to see when ARA releases later this year?
Well, there's so much to be said, of course, about the living world and all of those elements of the game that I'm so excited about. But when it comes to the narrative events specifically, there's one element of them that I realized we haven't discussed yet that I'm really excited about. And that's that every single one of our narrative events has a tie to history. And beyond that, a tie to anthropology, sometimes a tie to ecology, sociology, and art. And I think this is an amazing opportunity for us to explore not only, how is this fun for gameplay, but how is this reflecting the real patterns we see in our world? Learning a little bit about our past, our present, implications for our future. And although this is, a grand strategy game, a historical game, we also looked beyond that to look at what are some of the socio-cultural patterns we see across time. What are some things that we see in the natural world that we might be inspired by? So that's an element of gameplay I'm really excited for players to explore, to learn about the world and about history and about humankind, and to really get into how their choices might be part of a larger legacy.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gabriela. It was great to meet you. Do you have any last words for the fans before you go?
Thank you so much, Zach. It was great to meet you. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I'd say that I am so honored to have been part of making this game, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the different narrative events and the different choices, as well as any that are particularly resonant because they reference your own history, your own culture, or the places in the world where you are from. So I am so excited for that, and I can't wait to be talking with all of you when the game comes out later this year.
Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to subscribe for future content here on the channel. Follow us on the social platforms of your choice, and don't forget to wishlist ARA History Untold on Steam. And before you go, we're excited to announce a new technical alpha coming soon to members of the Insider program. If you haven't joined yet, go to arahistoryuntold.com and fill out the required information for your chance to play the game before launch. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.